Well, hey there, friendships. Welcome back to Curtis's Corner. If you're new here, hi, I'm Curtis, and this is my corner. Welcome to Movie Monday. In today's episode, I thought we could explore some of the deeper aspects of horror, understand where horror came from, and how it shaped the films of the horror genre we watch today. So get ready to dive headfirst into the darkest corners of horror history, where the scares are relentless and the twists will leave you breathless. This is just part one of our spine-chilling 5-part video series, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment. So, stay tuned, grab your pillows to cover those eyes, and strap in for a history lesson you won't ever forget. Before we dive into the screams and schemes of horror history, give this video a like if you're ready to be terrified. Hit that subscribe button for weekly chills and ring that notification bell so you never miss a jump scare. Or, my next video. And if you want early access to my videos and a say in what I cover next, check out my Patreon. It's just $2 and it gets you all of that and more. Alright, let's get spooky. Now, horror began all the way back in 1896 with the release of a horror short called Le Manoir du Diable, or House of the Devil. It was a silent film that ran for around 3 minutes and introduced the idea of horror as something for audiences to get into. Now, this short film inspired others to create their own horror films, with the first full-length feature film being in 1913 called Der Student von Prague, or The Student of Prague. This is a German silent film loosely based on the legend of Faust and some of Edgar Allan Poe's works. These film successes encouraged more directors to follow suit, with the first film that was popularized in the genre known as Da Cabinet de Dr. Caligari, or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, back in 1922. This film managed to touch upon psychological themes and captivated its audiences with its eerie atmosphere and distorted sets. This film became influential on many filmmakers for decades to come, which helped to establish some of the visual and thematic conventions of the genre we know and love today. Now let's move forward to 1931. Todd Browning released Dracula, which stars Bela Lugosi as the titular character. This film became one of the most influential pieces of horror for several reasons. It defined vampires in pop culture. The portrayal of Dracula in this film created the iconic image of vampires we see in many forms of media. Suave, mysterious, strong thick accent, and a cape. It also solidified the tropes of vampire weaknesses. Their aversion to sunlight, the need of a stake through the heart, and even the power of their hypnotic gaze. Now, this was the film that kickstarted the Universal monster movies, with the likes of Frankenstein from 1931, The Mummy in 1932, and The Wolfman in 1941, along with many others. It demonstrated to studios that horror could be successful. Dracula also brought the concept of Gothic horror to the forefront by adapting Bram Stoker's novel of the same name from 1897. The cinematography used to create an atmospheric style with the use of lights and shadow became synonymous with the classic horror tropes. Now, because this film was released during the Great Depression, it actually provided an escape from real life and managed to tap into the fears of death, the unknown, and even loss of control. This was also a pivotal moment for film with sound, as Dracula was able to incorporate dialogue with eerie sound effects to create a more immersive experience that silent films couldn't achieve. Dracula was basically the it girl of the generation. Not only did it spawn plenty of sequels, spin-offs, and inspirations within the genre, but it also popularized horror films worldwide. After the release of the initial Universal monster films mentioned before, 1943 saw the release of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. This film became the first ever shared universe concept film, and would not only spawn more films within this universe, but also the genre itself as well as out of the genre, such as the Marvel Universe and DC Universe. With the pairing of these characters in one film, the writers and directors are able to expand on the storytelling and character development of these established characters and how they would interact with each other. This This film also changed the game on special effect use, especially with the werewolf transformation, as well as introduced the element of action into the genre. This film inspired films like the Godzilla and other monster films, Freddy vs. Jason from 2003 and Alien vs. Predator from 2004. Now, as we enter the new decade, The Thing from Another World from 1951 dawned the new era known as science fiction horror. The film created the alien threat subgenre, which would become more popular during the 1970s and 1980s, with the concept moving away from the typical flying saucer aspect and more into body manipulation, diving into a whole new style of terror. The Thing, as it would later be known as, really found its strength in a way the atmosphere was presented, that being in a remote Arctic location, creating a sense of isolation paired with the alien being able to mimic its victims, which creates a sense of uncertainty and distrust. Finally, with the low budget The Thing had, the filmmakers created something spectacular, proving that if you use your budget in a smart way, you are able to create something captivating and interesting. Now let's flash forward to the 1960s, where yet again, horror takes a turn for the better. The release of Psycho in 1960 completely changed the horror genre and birthed a new subgenre, slashers. The boundaries of horror shifted into new territory by introducing psychological horror. With this concept, it shifted the expectations audiences had on the film that clearly depicted who the protagonists and antagonists were. It introduced the idea of human villains rather than always being something monstrous or supernatural. This was also the film that introduced the idea of flipping the story on its head with twist endings. Now, I won't spoil it if you haven't seen the movie, but this is one of the best twists in movie history, especially since there are two within the film. Now, Psycho pushed boundaries as well with how much violence was shown on screen, both physical and with a subtext of sexual violence too. Alfred Hitchcock explored what the antagonist could be by introducing more than a cookie-cutter format of what makes a villain a villain. With the strong story being told, the character study of the villain of the film shows that they aren't only just a murderer, but have been through some serious psychological trauma and unhealthy relationships. The filmmaking style was one of its kind as well, with the depiction of the brutality of the kills. The shower scene, for example, is proven to be very shocking even still to this day, with the quick cuts and the power of suggestion. You may not see everything that is happening on the screen, but the suggestion is implanted in your mind, thus creating a more horrific experience.
Do you love classic horror? The monsters, the terrible special effects? Well, have I got something for you? Introducing the Horror Box, your ticket to all the bad acting, questionable monsters, and VHS quality you never asked for. It's got everything. Mummies, werewolves, incredible fog, kinda. You won't find anything like it. It's free because it actually doesn't exist. Sign up today if you can handle it.
Now, just 3 years later, Alfred Hitchcock would release The Birds from 1963, which changed audiences' views on the monster movie theme by making the villain nature itself, that being birds of all species. This aspect made the film feel fresh and new as it brought out new fear in viewers about ordinary and everyday things that you see. This aspect would influence filmmakers to make other films involving regular everyday forces, such as what Jaws in 1975 did with a shark, which ultimately popularized the everyday animal horror, and Arachnophobia from 1990 did with spiders. There's also a psychological aspect to the film that Hitchcock creates around the birds themselves. There is no definitive reason why the birds begin attacking everyone, and for that reason, it creates a sense of unease and paranoia, which makes them question what is and isn't actually real. The birds also pushed the boundaries of using special effects. Because there wasn't much technology at the time that this film was made, Hitchcock and his team utilized as much as they could to create the realism of birds. These were especially prominent during the attack scenes, using rear projection, live trained birds, animatronics, and some special effects to attack the actors. The birds also brought forth the final girl trope, showing that Tippi Hedren's character of Melanie Daniels transforms from a vain character to someone who becomes very resourceful and determined. In 1968, a little gem known as Rosemary's Baby was released. This film garnered a lot of attention, especially with popularizing the psychological horror subgenre and moving away from the typical monster or gore. Rosemary's Baby touches upon paranoia as the main character feels as though something is happening to her, but no one believes her. These kinds of themes became recognized in future films like The Shining in 1980 and Hereditary in 2018. With the changing of times allowing women to have more control and independence because of the women's rights movement, this film plays on that loss of control over your own body. Rosemary's Baby also popularized satanic horror and caused a fear of the occult. This is a film that plays with the viewer's mind, allowing the power of suggestion to invoke the horror rather than displaying it on the screen. Now, I bet by now you're probably wondering, where are the zombies? Well, wait no further. In walks George A. Romero with his film Night of the Living Dead from 1968.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
This film defined what zombies are to this day. Undead creatures driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Romero also introduced the idea that there isn't a cure or a solution for the zombies.
I can still hear that voice.
Night of the Living Dead also had some social commentary using race, politics, and social critiques within the film in order to elevate its status among the bigger budget films of its time. The film garnered a lot of attention with the use of Dwayne Jones, who was one of the first black protagonists in a major horror film. Since the film's release, audiences seem to interpret it as more of a metaphor for the fear of consumerism and or the collapse of society. Now, because the film only had a budget of $100,000 at the time, in order to save on production, Romero opted to film in black and white. The effects weren't anything revolutionary, but the raw grit that they provided added to the storytelling of the film. The 1970s. This decade birthed yet another new genre with Dario Argento's feature debut, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, in 1970, creating what is now known as giallo. Giallo films typically feature striking and vivid colors, strange and unusual camera angles, and shadows in order to create a dream-like atmosphere. Argento tends to create storytelling through his imagery as well as the dialogue in order to give viewers a full scope of what is happening in this world that he has created. Usually, the killer in giallo films would wear black gloves as they stalked their victims, and the film would end up revealing some twists and hidden motives. This film also introduced audiences to a new point of view, being that of the killer himself. Now, this POV shot would be replicated in other films such as Halloween 1978 and Friday the 13th 1980. The score of the film also plays a very important aspect as it enhances the terror throughout the more suspenseful scenes. Now, the final film I'm going to talk about is Tales from the Crypt, 1972. This film popularized the horror anthology trend where multiple short stories can be told in just one film. This film is comprised of 5 interconnected short stories, all of which containing their own twist ending. This film had a big influence on Creepshow 1982. Not only did Tales from the Crypt popularize anthologies and twist endings, but it also introduced dark humor into the story as well, making characters more believable in situations or providing a sense of relief for the viewers during the more intense scenes. The film also pushed some of the boundaries with its use of gore and violence, which would also go on to inspire other films such as The Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974. The way Freddie Francis established the tone in the film helped to set up the spin-off TV show Tales from the Crypt of 1989, which introduced viewers to the beloved Crypt Keeper, a skeletal being with stringy hair that is used as the host of the show by introducing each segment using dark humor and horror elements. And there you have it, my friends, the first chapter of our descent into horror's darkest depths, where monsters lurk, shadows twist, and those old films still make our hearts race. From the eerie streets of Frankenstein to the chilling whispers of Psycho, these classics have shaped what we fear, how we scream, and even how we see the night. But this is just the beginning. The best is yet to come. The 70s, the 80s, the blood-curdling twists, and those unforgettable scream queens. They're all waiting. So make sure to creep back in for part 2 of our spine-chilling journey. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Don't forget, like this video if you want more nightmares sent straight to your screen. No delivery fee and no way to return them. Subscribe to my channel and ring that notification bell so when the next chapter of horror history creeps up behind you, you'll be the first to feel its cold, clammy hands on your shoulder. And trust me, you'll want to be there when we open the door to the next nightmare. It might just lock behind you. Until then, my friends, may your nightmares be as sweet as horror classic and twice as terrifying. Goodbye, friendships.